Some moments forever divide time into before and after. For the officers of Northridge Police Department, that moment arrived when 500 pounds of wild predator padded across their polished floor on a rain-soaked Tuesday morning. The massive grizzly bear moved with unnatural purpose, ignoring drawn weapons and shouted commands. What happened next would send shockwaves through law enforcement agencies across the country. The item that tumbled from the bear's jaws onto Officer Raymond's desk wasn't just evidence. It was the missing piece in a puzzle that had haunted detectives for years. As the bear's offering was identified, hardened police veterans felt their blood run cold. Nature had just delivered what dozens of search parties, forensic teams, and FBI profilers had failed to uncover. The wilderness had witnessed what no human had, and somehow, impossibly, this apex predator had chosen to become the messenger. The bear had not only crossed the threshold between forest and civilization, it had shattered the boundary between animal instinct and something that felt eerily, disturbingly like justice. The morning had begun like any other at the Northridge Police Station. Rain tapped gently against the windows, creating a soothing rhythm that contrasted with the tension that had gripped the small mountain community for months. The station sat nestled between towering pines at the edge of town, serving as the final outpost before wilderness took over. It was a place where wildlife sightings were noted on the same bulletin board as traffic violations. Officer Thomas Jenkins sipped his coffee as he settled into his chair at the front desk. At 58, with silver hair and deep lines etched around his eyes, Jenkins had become a fixture in Northridge. 32 years on the force had taught him to expect the unexpected, but nothing had prepared him for what this day would bring. He rubbed his weathered face and opened the missing persons file that had consumed the department for the past 6 months. The station was quiet this morning. Most officers were out on patrol or following up on the latest disappearance. 7 people had vanished without a trace since winter gave way to spring. First was Marcus Holloway, a geology professor collecting samples in the Northern Ridge. Then came the Sullivan siblings, experienced hikers who never returned from their weekend trek. By summer, 4 more names joined the list. Each case grew cold almost immediately. No bodies, no evidence, just empty search grids and grieving families. Jenkins studied the map pinned to the wall beside his desk. Red pins marked the last known locations of the missing. Blue pins indicated areas thoroughly searched. Yellow pins showed where personal items had been recovered. The pattern made no sense. The disappearances occurred in different areas to people of varying ages and backgrounds. The only common thread was the mountains themselves. The initial theory of animal attacks fell apart when no remains were found. The forest predator theory gave way to speculation about a human predator. FBI agents had come and gone, leaving behind psychological profiles and statistical analyses that did nothing to bring closure to the families or peace to the community. Outside the station windows, the ancient forest stirred in the morning breeze. Something about the wilderness had always made Jenkins uneasy. Not fear exactly, but a profound respect for its indifference to human concerns. The forest kept its secrets well. The radio crackled with routine traffic stops and minor incidents. Jenkins acknowledged each one methodically as he reviewed witness statements for the 100th time. The coffee grew cold beside him. Rain continued its gentle percussion against the windows. The clock on the wall ticked away minutes in the otherwise silent room. None of the officers on duty noticed the security camera footage showing movement at the rear entrance of the station. None saw the large shape emerge from the tree line and pause at the edge of the parking lot. None were watching when the electronic doors slid open, allowing an intruder unlike any other to enter the building. The day that would change everything in Northridge had begun, and Officer Jenkins, veteran cop with decades of experience, was about to come face to face with a truth stranger than any theory the task force had considered. Officer Jenkins first became aware that something was wrong when the air in the station changed. A sudden draft swept through the room, carrying with it the unmistakable scent of wilderness, wet fur, earth, something primal. He looked up from his paperwork, his instincts firing warning signals before his mind could process why. The back door that led to the parking lot was open. Standing in the doorway, silhouetted against the misty morning light, was a shape that did not belong in any police station. A massive brown bear, Its fur slick with rain filled the entire frame. Steam rose from its body in the cool air conditioning of the building. Jenkins froze, his coffee mug suspended halfway to his lips. For 3 heartbeats, no one moved. Then Officer Ramirez emerged from the break room and dropped his donut at the sight before him. The clatter of the plate hitting the floor broke the spell. "Bear! We have a bear in the station!" Ramirez shouted, his hand instinctively moving to his service weapon. The shout triggered a flurry of activity. 2 officers appeared from the hallway leading to the records room. Sergeant Wallace emerged from his office, stopping short at the sight of the enormous creature. 4 hands reached for 4 weapons almost simultaneously. "Wait!" Jenkins called out, his voice cutting through the chaos. Something about the bear struck him as odd. It showed none of the aggression or fear one would expect from a wild animal cornered in a human space. It stood perfectly still, surveying the room with an intelligence that seemed impossible for a creature of the forest. The bear was enormous. Standing on all 4s, its shoulder height matched that of a grown man. Its coat was a rich brown, almost reddish in the fluorescent lighting of the station. But it was the eyes that captured Jenkins' attention. Dark, gleaming with an awareness that sent chills down his spine. "Nobody shoots unless absolutely necessary," Sergeant Wallace ordered, his voice tight with tension. "Animal control is at least 20 minutes out. Jenkins, hit the evacuation alarm." But before Jenkins could reach for the alarm, the bear began to move. Not in the frantic, destructive way one might expect from a panicked wild animal, but with deliberate, measured steps. It padded across the linoleum floor, claws clicking against the surface. Officers backed away, creating a path between the doorway and the front desk. Wallace and Ramirez had their weapons drawn but held at low ready. Something told them all that sudden movements would be a mistake. The bear continued its steady approach toward the front desk, toward Jenkins. He remained frozen in place, years of training seemingly useless in the face of this unprecedented situation. The bear moved with purpose, its eyes never leaving Jenkins. It showed no interest in the other officers, no distraction from whatever mission had brought it into this human domain. "Jenkins, slowly move away from the desk," Wallace whispered urgently. But Jenkins could not move. Some primal instinct told him that running would be worse than standing his ground. The bear was now 5 feet away from him, close enough that he could smell its wild scent, see the water droplets clinging to its thick fur, hear the heavy rhythm of its breathing. The entire station had gone completely silent. The only sounds were the soft pad of the bear's paws on the floor and the pounding of Jenkins' heart in his ears. No one dared to speak or move as the massive creature approached the front desk with an almost ceremonial slowness. 3 feet away, 2 feet. The bear stopped directly in front of Jenkins' desk. It raised its massive head to meet the officer's gaze. For a moment that seemed to stretch into eternity, man and beast regarded each other across the narrow boundary of the wooden desk. Then, with deliberate slowness, the bear opened its powerful jaws. Time seemed to stop as the bear's jaws parted. Jenkins found himself unable to breathe, unable to think. His decades of police training had never prepared him for this moment. The massive predator's breath fogged in the cool air of the station. Its teeth, yellowed and sharp, glistened under the fluorescent lights. From somewhere behind him, Jenkins heard the unmistakable sound of a safety being clicked off. The bear's ears twitched at the noise, but its focus remained unbroken. There was something clutched between its teeth, something Jenkins could not immediately identify. Dark, irregular, wet. With a movement that seemed almost gentle, the bear lowered its head over the desk. Its jaw relaxed. The object fell with a sickening thud onto the stack of missing persons reports. A small pool of dark liquid immediately began to spread across the paper. For several seconds, Jenkins could not comprehend what he was seeing. His mind refused to accept the information his eyes were sending. Then recognition crashed through him like a physical blow. Lying on his desk was a human hand. Severed at the wrist, the flesh ragged but preserved by the cool mountain air. The skin had a bluish tint, indicating it had been separated from its owner for some time. The forest had begun to reclaim it, with bits of soil and pine needles embedded in the flesh. But the hand was unmistakably human. Male, adult. "Jesus Christ," Sergeant Wallace whispered from somewhere to Jenkins' right. The words seemed to come from a great distance, but it was the ring that caused Jenkins' blood to freeze in his veins. A distinctive gold band with a square-cut emerald stone. He had seen it before, in photographs during the investigation, in pictures of a smiling man surrounded by family. In the missing persons file of Marcus Holloway, the geology professor who had been the first to disappear. The bear remained motionless, as if waiting for them to understand the significance of its delivery. Its dark eyes watched Jenkins with an intensity that seemed impossible for a wild animal. "That is Holloway's ring," Jenkins managed to say, his voice barely audible. "I would recognize it anywhere. His wife said he never took it off. Anniversary gift." The implications crashed into the room like a physical force. This was no random animal encounter. This was evidence. This was proof that at least one of the missing persons was dead. And somehow, impossibly, this wild creature had brought it directly to law enforcement. Officer Ramirez made a choking sound, then rushed to the bathroom. The sound of retching echoed in the silent station. No one else moved. Sergeant Wallace finally broke the silence. "Someone get forensics in here, now, and someone else take photos. Document everything exactly as it is." Jenkins could not take his eyes off the severed hand. The way the fingers were curled suggested a grasping motion at the time of death. Defensive wounds marked the knuckles. This had not been a simple animal attack. This was something else entirely. The bear took a single step backward, still watching the officers. Its message delivered, it seemed to be waiting for a response. For a moment, Jenkins felt as though he could almost read intention in those wild eyes. Not malice, not hunger. Something that felt disturbingly like purpose. "What does it want?" an officer whispered. "I think," Jenkins said slowly, "it wants us to follow it." The station erupted into controlled chaos. Sergeant Wallace barked orders while officers Rodriguez and Chen secured the perimeter of the building. No one wanted curious civilians wandering in while a massive bear stood in their lobby. Jenkins remained at his desk, his eyes moving between the severed hand and the bear that had delivered it. "I need Holloway's file right now," Wallace demanded, his face pale but determined. Jenkins slid the file across the desk, careful not to disturb the grim evidence. The sergeant flipped it open to the photo of Marcus Holloway. The geology professor smiled up from the page, his left hand resting on a rock sample, the distinctive emerald ring clearly visible. "It matches," Jenkins confirmed, though no one had questioned it. "That is definitely his ring." Forensics technician Patel arrived, stopping short at the sight of the bear still standing calmly in the station. "What in the world?" "Deal with that first," Wallace pointed to the hand. "We will figure out what to do about our visitor after." As Patel approached cautiously with her kit, the bear took another step backward toward the door. It made a low sound in its throat, not quite a growl. More like a call. "It wants us to follow it," Jenkins repeated, more certain now. "This is not normal bear behavior, not by a long shot. It brought us evidence, and now it wants to show us something more." Wallace looked torn between standard protocol and the unprecedented situation before him. "We cannot just follow a wild animal into the forest." "With all due respect, sir," Jenkins countered, "we have been searching for 6 months with no results. 7 people are missing, and now this bear brings us the first real evidence we have seen. I think we need to consider that it might be leading us to something important." The bear took another deliberate step toward the exit, then turned to look back at them. "Animal behavior experts say some animals can understand human intentions," Officer Chen offered quietly. "Maybe it found a body, or a crime scene." Decision crystallized in Wallace's eyes. "Jenkins, Chen, Rodriguez, gear up. Full tactical equipment, medical kits, GPS trackers. We follow the bear but maintain safe distance. Park rangers have been notified and will meet us at the trailhead. Patel, get that evidence processed immediately. I want DNA confirmation within the hour." Jenkins grabbed his gear from his locker, hands moving automatically through the familiar routine, while his mind raced with implications. This was either the breakthrough they had been waiting for, or the most elaborate wild goose chase in law enforcement history. Outside, rain continued to fall. The bear had moved to the edge of the parking lot and stood watching the station entrance. Its patience seemed impossible for a wild creature. When it saw the officers emerge in their gear, it turned and moved toward the tree line, stopping once to look back, as if ensuring they were following. "I cannot believe we are doing this," Rodriguez muttered, checking his weapon. "Neither can I," Jenkins admitted. "But something tells me this is our only chance to find out what happened to these people." The bear disappeared into the forest. The three officers followed, stepping from the ordered world of human civilization into the ancient wilderness beyond. The forest enveloped the officers as they ventured deeper into the wilderness. The rain had softened to a misty drizzle, making the path slick and treacherous. The bear moved with surprising speed, following a route that appeared on none of their maps. 40 minutes into their trek, each step took them further from safety and deeper into mystery. "This area was searched 3 times after the Sullivan siblings disappeared," Chen said, consulting her GPS. "Nothing was ever found." Jenkins studied the ground. The bear's tracks formed a direct path with no signs of the random, wandering typical of foraging animals. "It knows exactly where it is going." Park rangers Hoffman and Miyazaki had joined them at the trailhead with tranquilizer equipment. The bear maintained a consistent 50-foot lead, occasionally glancing back as if ensuring they followed. The terrain steepened as they ascended. Jenkins noticed unusual patterns in the vegetation surrounding them. "This area was cleared," Ranger Hoffman confirmed. "Not legally. We found evidence of unauthorized activity about 2 years ago, but never caught anyone." The bear suddenly veered from the barely visible trail toward a rocky outcropping jutting from the mountainside. It disappeared around the formation. "Careful," Wallace cautioned over the radio. "Could be heading into a den." What they found was not a den, but a narrow cave entrance, partially concealed by young growth. The bear stood at the threshold, watching them with that same unsettling intelligence. "This cave system isn't marked on any public record," Rodriguez noted, recognizing the area from topographical maps. Jenkins approached cautiously. The cave mouth emitted a stale odor that turned his stomach. Not the musty smell of a natural cave, but something chemical and distinctly human-made. The bear entered. Against all protocol, the officers followed. The narrow entrance widened into a larger chamber, where their flashlights revealed what 6 months of searching had failed to find. The cave had been converted into a sophisticated laboratory. Plastic sheeting separated different areas. Tables held scientific equipment alongside objects that had no place in legitimate research. A generator hummed in one corner, powering a row of large freezers along the far wall. "This is human activity," Chen whispered, "not animal." In the back chamber, they found clothing belonging to the missing hikers, neatly folded and labeled. Wallets, phones, watches, all the personal effects that would be scattered in animal attacks. Rodriguez opened one freezer and immediately slammed it shut, his face ashen. "We need forensics here now, and backup." The bear settled near what appeared to be a desk covered with notebooks and electronic equipment. Jenkins examined the materials without touching them. The notebooks contained detailed records, dates, names, procedures. The language was clinical, but the implications horrifying. Human experimentation conducted where screams would never reach civilization. "They weren't random disappearances," Jenkins said. "They were selected." The bear growled softly, drawing their attention to something they had missed. A fallen wallet lay behind the desk, belonging to the most recent victim who had disappeared just 2 weeks ago. As they explored further, the true scope of the operation became clear. This was no small-scale crime, but a fully equipped facility designed for long-term use. Sophisticated medical equipment, chemical storage, computer systems. Whoever had built this had resources, knowledge, and complete disregard for human life. "Look at this," Ranger Miyazaki called from a side chamber. Their flashlights revealed a wall covered with photographs. The missing hikers, but also dozens more faces they didn't recognize. Some images were marked with red X's, others had dates written beneath them. Future targets. "This isn't one person," Jenkins realized, the magnitude of the discovery washing over him. "This is organized, professional." The bear watched them silently from its position by the desk, its role in uncovering this atrocity beyond explanation. Chen's radio crackled. "You need to see what's on these hard drives," Wallace's voice came through. "Forensics just pulled data from that hand's fingerprints. This goes deeper than we thought." Back at the station, forensics teams worked frantically to process the evidence streaming in from the cave. The bear had been safely contained by wildlife officials and was being kept under observation. Its behavior continued to baffle animal experts who had been called in from the state university. Jenkins stared at the evidence board, now crowded with photos from the cave laboratory. The pieces were finally falling into place, revealing a picture darker than anyone had imagined. The DNA results confirm it, Patel announced, entering the room with a file in hand. The blood samples from the cave match all 7 missing persons, and the hand definitely belongs to Marcus Holloway. What about the other remains? Wallace asked, his voice heavy. At least 15 different DNA profiles, Patel replied. Most don't match any missing persons in our database. This has been going on longer than we realized. The computer forensics team had recovered data from the equipment found in the cave. The files contained methodical records of abductions, experiments, and disposals stretching back nearly 5 years. He calls himself the naturalist, the tech specialist explained, pointing to journal entries displayed on the screen. A former medical researcher named Victor Sheldon who lost his license after ethical violations. He believes he's developing some kind of enhancement serum using enzymes found in local wildlife. The victims were his test subjects. Jenkins studied the map where they had marked the locations of the cave and the disposal sites mentioned in Sheldon's records. One site in particular caught his attention. This is it, he said, tapping the map. This disposal site is directly in the territory of the bear that came to us. It must have discovered Holloway's remains there. Wildlife biologist Dr. Patterson nodded thoughtfully. Bears have incredible sense of smell and memory. This bear likely encountered the body and, for whatever reason, decided to bring the hand to where it had seen humans gathering. So a bear solved a case that had stumped the FBI, Rodriguez said, shaking his head in disbelief. Nature found a way, Jenkins murmured. When we couldn't track this killer, the wilderness itself exposed him. The profile of Victor Sheldon now dominated the center of the evidence board. Former pharmaceutical researcher, wilderness survival expert, owner of a remote property bordering the national forest. His seemingly legitimate research supply company had provided the perfect cover for acquiring equipment and chemicals. We have his location, Wallace announced, hanging up the phone. A cabin 20 miles north of the cave. Surveillance confirms he's there now. Jenkins studied the bear through the observation window. The animal was calm, showing no signs of aggression or stress. Its role in this case defied explanation. Some might call it coincidence. Others, perhaps, something more. We need to move now, Wallace said, breaking into Jenkins' thoughts. Tactical team is prepping. We take down Sheldon tonight. Jenkins nodded, turning away from the bear. The wilderness gave us this chance. We can't waste it. Darkness had settled over the mountains by the time the tactical team assembled. Rain fell in heavy sheets, reducing visibility and muffling sound. Perfect conditions for their approach to Sheldon's cabin. Jenkins checked his weapon one final time before joining the team in the transport vehicle. His usual place was behind a desk. But Wallace had recognized his unique connection to this case. You started this, the sergeant had said. You should see it through. Satellite imagery had revealed Sheldon's property as a seemingly innocent homestead. A main cabin, a shed, a small greenhouse. But the thermal scans told a different story. Underground spaces, hidden rooms, and a single heat signature moving between them. The convoy moved silently along the forest road, lights off, guided by night vision. Half a mile from the target, they stopped. The rest would be on foot. 20 officers from various agencies moved through the rain-soaked forest in perfect formation. FBI tactical specialists led the way, followed by local SWAT and forest rangers who knew the terrain. Jenkins felt the weight of the missing persons' families with every step. People who had waited months for answers. People who deserved justice. They reached the perimeter of Sheldon's property. No lights shone from the cabin windows, but smoke curled from the chimney. He was home. All teams in position, came the whispered confirmation through Jenkins' earpiece. On my mark. The seconds stretched into eternities as they waited for the command. Jenkins could hear his own heartbeat above the gentle patter of rain on leaves. Execute! The forest erupted with coordinated movement. Tactical teams breached from 4 directions simultaneously. Flashbang grenades illuminated the night. Commands echoed through the darkness. Police! Don't move! Hands where we can see them! but the cabin was empty. "Movement at the greenhouse," crackled through the radio. "Subject is fleeing north into the forest." Jenkins found himself running without conscious thought, following the bobbing flashlights ahead. His knowledge of these mountains guided his steps even in darkness. Sheldon was heading toward the steepest terrain, hoping to lose them in the treacherous slopes. A figure appeared briefly in the beam of a searchlight. Sheldon, running with the desperation of a man who knew what awaited him if captured. The chase led them to a narrow ridge overlooking a ravine. Sheldon stood at the edge, nowhere left to run. Behind him, the forest. Before him, a 100-foot drop. "It is over, Sheldon," Jenkins called out. "7 murders. Probably more. You cannot escape this." Sheldon turned slowly. In the beam of Jenkins' flashlight, his face showed no fear, only cold calculation. "My work is too important," he said calmly. "You cannot possibly understand what I have achieved." He took a step backward, toward the edge. "The next step is the last one you take," Jenkins warned. "Is that how you want this to end?" For one heart-stopping moment, it seemed Sheldon would choose the ravine. Then unexpectedly, he dropped to his knees in surrender. "It does not matter," he said as the officers moved in to secure him. "My research will survive. Others will continue." Those words sent a chill through Jenkins that had nothing to do with the rain soaking his uniform. 1 month after Victor Sheldon's capture, Northridge held a memorial service for all victims. Families who had endured months of uncertainty finally had answers. 7 wooden urns sat at the front of the community center, surrounded by photographs of lives cut short. Jenkins watched from the back row as family members shared memories of their loved ones. The case had transformed him in ways he struggled to define. The line between wilderness and civilization seemed forever blurred. Sheldon's detailed journals had left no doubt about his guilt. The additional remains found at sites mentioned in his records helped identify 12 more victims dating back nearly a decade. Families from across the country had finally received the closure they desperately needed. The bear, nicknamed Justice by the media, had become a local legend. After observation by wildlife experts, it had been released back into the forest with a tracking collar. Dr. Patterson presented her findings to the community. "While we cannot attribute human motivations to animal behavior," she explained, "bears possess remarkable intelligence and problem-solving abilities. This bear likely made an association between humans and the station after observing search parties. Bringing the hand was probably an extension of natural food-carrying behavior, though the specific choice of the police station remains scientifically unexplainable." For Northridge residents, the explanation hardly mattered. Their relationship with the surrounding wilderness had been transformed. Warning signs about bear dangers remained, but new signs encouraging respect for forest inhabitants appeared alongside them. The community itself had changed most profoundly. Neighbors who barely acknowledged each other now connected warmly. Conservation efforts received unprecedented support. The police station had become a symbol of how justice could find its path in unexpected ways. Jenkins often found himself looking toward the forest during patrols. Once he glimpsed a familiar shape watching from the tree line. He raised his hand in a small salute. Whether to Justice the bear or to something larger than both of them, he could not say. Some mysteries he had learned are best left unsolved. If this extraordinary tale of nature's intervention in human justice moved you, many more incredible stories await on our channel. Subscribe now to receive daily true stories that challenge our understanding of the world around us. Click the notification bell to never miss an upload and join our community seeking truth in the unexplained.